Nikon D3500 is a camera that I have used since June 2023. I started going out with it to landscape photography, and as time moved on, I started using it for portrait photography, making videos, and I think I have used this camera long enough to give a review that is not biased in any way. So when we start with portrait photography, which is one of the genres of photography, many people like to use this camera. As much as you will get good looking images with this camera, the truth is when you are using a crop sensor camera and you want to take a full body portrait of your subject, you end up being compelled to stand way back in order to fit the subject in the frame. What that does is a lot of megapixels get wasted on the surrounding, and when you try to crop the image to get the size that you want, you end up with a good image that could have been sharper. But now when you compare that to using a full frame camera, when you are using a full frame camera, you don't step way back. Your distance can be just 2 meters away from your subject, and in that distance you are able to fit your subject in an entire frame. As a result of that, a lot of megapixels are concentrated on your subject, which means even when you zoom in, your subject will always be in sharp detail, and because your subject is also closer, the sharpness will be outstanding as compared to the crop sensor and Nikon D3500. And to test this theory, if you want to confirm that this is true, try and take a half-body portrait of your subject or a hand shot. You will notice that the hand shots are cleaner and sharper as compared to full body portraits with the same camera. So to conclude this, I'll say that as much as this camera is usable for portrait photography, if you want to do real portrait photography, you have to find a way of getting a full frame camera. I am headed towards that direction, and that is the truth of the matter, and that is from experience, and also that is basic physics. Now moving on to video, if you can overcome the autofocus problems this camera comes with, then you get sharper, cleaner videos. And now comparing it to the full frame, for videos I'll say that you don't require all that sharpness. The sharpness that this camera gives is enough for video. All you need is to have some lights if you are using this camera indoors. Outdoors, this camera will give you good looking videos. And the dynamic range, if you set up your camera the right way, this camera will give you very good dynamic range. There won't be details in the crowns, details in the shadows, and the midtones will be balanced in most video clips if you set up this camera correctly. As for audio or video audio, I think you need to find another way of recording your audio, because the audio coming out of this camera's internal microphones is not usable. You will struggle with it. It does not have a mic input, so you have to find a way of recording your audio externally. Now, when it comes to photography, outdoor landscape photography, so this camera will give you good looking images, the kind of which you would expect from a crop sensor camera, but comparing it to something like its equivalent from the Canon side, because I have used it side by side with Canon 18D, and say that the dynamic range of this camera could be twice as better as that of Canon 18D, and you will get to see this if you see a side by side. But if you want to hear from someone who has been using it outdoor, I can attest to the fact that the dynamic range coming out of this camera is better than the equivalent from the Canon. In low light, you will have to find external lights or external sources of light if you want to have cleaner videos. So there's no shortcut about that. If you don't provide your camera lights or enough light, then the video will suffer some issues, some noise, and if you try to edit it, if it is noisy, there is no way you are going to repair that video. So in conclusion, I would say that this camera is a nice tool to teach yourself photography, to do basic photography. But if you want to buy a camera that you will use for the longest time for professional photography, professional videos, professional anything that you are getting paid to do, this might not be the camera for that, because you will have to come across so many issues. For instance, if you want to be paid to shoot anything with this camera, then you have to spend some money on the sources of audio, because you will not rely on the audio coming out of this camera. Then when you are being paid to do portraiture with this one, you will meet some customers who will not be satisfied with the images you are capturing with this camera, and not many people want handshots. Most people want full body portraits. So you will have to contend with that problem as long as you are using this camera as your professional camera. As for video, the battery dies within a short period of time, so you either have to buy a battery pack if you can find an external source of power so that you can power this camera continually. But if you are going to rely on the internal battery, then you are going to buy several of them, and those are the issues you are going to contend with when you try to use this camera for paint work. So what I have learned so far after using this, because I also have the Canon 18D which I have been using and the Canon 15D. If you want to be paid and you want to position yourself as someone who is doing high-end professional photography or professional work with the cameras, I think these small cameras are not cameras that will give you results that will match what other professionals are doing, because people meet other people see what other people are producing. Sometimes someone comes to you with an image and they say, I want you to reproduce an image like this one, and looking at the image right away you can tell that this is not possible, because looking at the image you see that this image was captured with a full frame camera. It was captured with a fast lens, and the lighting setup that was prevalent during this image creation, I do not have that kind of setup right now. And people wonder, how are you a photographer yet you cannot recreate this image that was captured by your fellow photographer? People don't understand, but as a photographer you have to understand. So before you position yourself as a professional photographer, someone who can be called for paint work, and you want to be paid as good as other photographers, whether you like it or not, you have to invest in good cameras, good lenses that can match what other professionals are giving. Otherwise you end up doing small businesses that don't pay much, and once you get in that cycle, I think that cycle is hard to leave, because that will be your level. If you want someone who can do this kind of work for this amount of money, that will be you. And with that, how are you going to afford those high-end cameras that you don't even need to struggle to create content with? So that has been my experience with this camera, and I'll continue using it for as long as I have to. But for paint work or anything like that, I will have to find ways of sourcing for high-end cameras that do not disappoint. There's plenty of them. I have been looking at not GH5, but S5 Mark II. Those kind of cameras for paint work, I think you even have some confidence, because you know the camera will not let you down. But this camera, this Nikon D3500, a customer will tell you to recreate an image and you will struggle, and you will not be able to recreate that image, not because you don't have the skills or the know-how, but because of the limitations of the camera. So you have to use it for the right purposes, like YouTube content creation, basic photography, and things like that.